After I paid off her credit card debt and bought groceries with my bonus, my wife sent a picture of me clipping coupons to her group chat with the caption, "Married a granddad, not a man." Her friends thought it was hilarious. I did too, until she checked her account one morning and found, "I'm Matt, 33, and I've been married to Sophie for 5 years now." I'd like to think we've had a pretty solid relationship, though it's had its ups and downs. I'm not one for drama, but I feel like I've hit a breaking point with Sophie, and what's worse is, I'm not sure if it's too late to fix things or if I even want it anymore. Let me start with the financial situation. Sophie and I don't talk about money all that much. It's one of those things where we have separate accounts and usually we try to keep things simple. I handle the bills, she takes care of some of the household expenses, and everything works out, mostly. Well, that was until her credit card debt came to light. It all started when Sophie asked me for help with her credit card bills. She'd been putting it off for a while, but I could see how much it was weighing on her. She'd maxed out her cards on things like clothes and random online purchases, most of which weren't necessary but were things she really wanted. The total debt was sitting at about $9,000, which, for us, was a lot. I didn't want to see her struggle, so I used some of my bonus from work to pay it off. It felt like the right thing to do, you know? I thought it would be a good way to help her out, show her I was there for her, and it would get rid of that stress. But that's where the first crack in our relationship started to form. Sophie was incredibly grateful at first. She kept saying how relieved she was and how I was such a good husband. I thought it was a positive step, but things started to shift slowly. It wasn't immediate, but I began to notice Sophie's attitude changing. She wasn't as appreciative as she seemed at first. She started to bring up how she hadn't really been able to buy anything nice for herself in a while. I would respond by saying she should be more careful with spending, but I also didn't want her to feel like I was being too controlling. Then came the grocery store incident. A few weeks after I paid off her debt, we were at the store, and I was buying some essentials. I'd just gotten my bonus from work, and I wanted to make sure we were stocked up for the month. To save money, I was clipping coupons while we were there. It wasn't a big deal to me, but it was something that made Sophie roll her eyes. I didn't think much of it at the time. That's when she pulled out her phone. She took a picture of me standing in the aisle, holding a stack of coupons, looking a little ridiculous, to be honest. But I didn't think anything of it until she sent it to her group chat with her friends. The caption she added was, "Married a granddad, not a man." I laughed it off. I really did. I mean, I get that it was a little funny in a cringeworthy way, but Sophie's friends thought it was hilarious. One of them even replied, "LMAO, Matt is really out here trying to save a dime." It didn't bother me at the time. I was secure in my decisions, and honestly, I thought Sophie was just joking around. I thought she was proud of me for saving money, even if it wasn't the most glamorous way to go about it. But things started to change after that. Sophie's little jab kept popping up in conversations. Whenever we go to dinner with friends or family, she'd bring up how I'd clip coupons and pinch pennies. At first, I thought it was all in good fun, but it started to feel a little mean. And then one morning, she did something that made me stop laughing. She checked her bank account. I didn't know what had happened until Sophie came into the living room, her face pale. She was holding her phone with her hand shaking a little. I could see the worry on her face, and for a second, my stomach dropped. "Matt," she said, "why is there only $50 left in my account?" I wasn't sure what she was talking about. We'd just gotten paid a few days ago, and I hadn't touched her account, so I was confused. But when I looked at the screen of her phone, I saw what had happened. The $9,000 debt I'd paid off. Well, Sophie had gone ahead and racked up $4,000 of it again. This time, on things I couldn't even begin to understand. Online shopping sprees, a designer purse she had mentioned once but didn't really need, and a few random subscription services. It was like she didn't even care about the situation anymore. I didn't say anything at first. My mind was racing. Sophie looked at me with wide eyes and asked, "What's going on?" I stayed quiet, my brain working through the shock of what I was seeing. I wish I could say I just let it go, that I kept my cool, but I didn't. I snapped. I took a deep breath and said, Maybe I should start clipping coupons for your spending habits instead. Sophie's eyes went from confused to defensive, and I knew right then that things were about to get a whole lot worse. The tone of the conversation shifted, and I could see the tension in her eyes. It was like she had no idea how her actions had led us to this point. I'm not proud of the way I reacted, but I was furious. I was exhausted from trying to be the responsible one in the relationship, and Sophie wasn't showing any signs of learning her lesson. She didn't get it, and that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I'm not sure if it was the right thing to do, but I wanted her to understand the consequences of her behavior. So I made a decision, one that would affect both of us. The next few days felt like walking on eggshells. Sophie didn't talk to me much after that morning when I had snapped at her. I could tell she was avoiding the topic of money, and honestly, I was avoiding it too. It wasn't that I didn't want to address the issue, but every time I thought about it, I felt this wave of frustration wash over me. I wanted to give her space, but I also knew that if I didn't do something, this cycle of her bad financial habits would continue, and I'd be stuck carrying the weight of it all. It wasn't that Sophie was a bad person. She wasn't. But the way she handled money, the way she shrugged off the importance of it, was starting to feel like a betrayal. I'd gone out of my way to pay off her credit card debt, to take some of that weight off her shoulders, and in return, she was back at square one, digging herself deeper into a hole. It wasn't just about the money at that point. It was about trust. She knew I was the one who kept us afloat financially, and yet she was disregarding that. I think what hurt the most was that Sophie didn't seem to care how much effort I'd put in. Instead, she was too caught up in her own desires to stop and think about how her actions affected me. And that picture, the one she'd sent to her friends with the granddad joke, kept replaying in my mind. It wasn't the coupon clipping that stung. It was the implication that I was somehow less of a man for being financially responsible. But I didn't want to confront her with it just yet. I was waiting for the right moment, trying to think through how I could get my point across without completely blowing up our relationship. I knew things had to change, but I had to make sure Sophie understood why they had to change. A few days later, Sophie came to me, looking a little more relaxed than usual. I could tell she had been stewing over things too because her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Matt, I've been thinking about what happened with the bank account," she said. "I know I made some mistakes, and I'm sorry." I had to bite my tongue. I wanted to say something to make her understand just how frustrated I was, but I also didn't want to make it worse. So, I just nodded and said, "Yeah, I saw what happened." She sighed, looking down at her hands, then back up at me. "I know I shouldn't have spent that much again. I guess I got carried away." She shifted on the couch, her voice small. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know you didn't," I said quietly. "But Sophie, it's not just about the spending. It's about the fact that I'm the one who always has to fix it. I don't mind helping, but you have to meet me halfway. You can't keep making the same mistakes over and over." She looked at me, clearly uncomfortable, and I could see the defensiveness creeping back into her eyes. "I don't need a lecture, Matt. I'm trying to do better." "I don't want to lecture you," I said, my voice firm but calm. "I just want you to understand that there are consequences to these choices. I can't be the only one holding it together. You need to take responsibility for your actions." She stood up, walking toward the kitchen. The tension in the room thickened, and I could feel the distance between us growing. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about trust, communication, and respect. And right now, I wasn't sure we had any of those things. That night, Sophie stayed out late. I didn't ask where she was going. I was too tired to care. It wasn't until the next morning, when I was getting ready for work, that I saw what she'd done. I walked into the kitchen, and there on the table was a new receipt. It wasn't for groceries or anything practical. No, it was for another impulse purchase, this time, a designer handbag. The price was outrageous, and I could already feel my blood pressure rising. I didn't know if I should be angry, sad, or both. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. It wasn't until she came home hours later that we had another confrontation. She looked guilty when she saw the receipt on the table. I didn't say anything, but the look on my face must have been enough because she immediately sat down, looking exhausted. "Matt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I messed up. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have bought it." I don't know what I was thinking. I was silent for a long time, processing everything. She hadn't apologized for racking up the debt again, but she was sorry for the handbag. And that, in a nutshell, was our problem. She wasn't seeing the bigger picture. "I think it's time we had a real talk," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "We can't keep going on like this." She looked at me with pleading eyes, but there was no excuse she could give that would make me feel any better. I didn't know what to do anymore, but I knew I couldn't keep enabling her behavior. And I wasn't sure what the next step would be, whether I was going to keep covering for her, or if I was finally going to put my foot down. Sophie must have seen the shift in me because she didn't argue, but the silence that followed spoke volumes. We both knew something had to change. The days following the incident with the designer handbag were filled with tension, but the real shift came when Sophie began to act differently, almost like nothing had happened at all. She was back to her usual routine, going to work, chatting with her friends, posting on social media like she didn't have a care in the world. It was like the conversation we'd had meant nothing to her. I could see it in the way she carried herself, the way she smiled a little too brightly when she walked past me. But what really got to me was that she didn't change. Not in any meaningful way. She'd apologize, sure, but it was always shallow, empty words that seemed to lack any real conviction. After the handbag incident, I thought she'd at least try harder, at least start looking for a solution to her financial mess. But instead, she did what she always did. She buried her head in the sand and pretended it wasn't there. I tried everything I could think of. I'd helped her with her debt. I'd tried to talk to her. I'd asked her to take responsibility for her actions. But the more I did, the more I felt like a fool. I was constantly cleaning up her messes, and all I was getting in return was a version of Sophie that didn't seem to care. It started to feel less like a partnership and more like I was being taken for granted. I had always been the kind of guy who would rather fix things than walk away. I believed in second chances. But this time, something inside me was starting to shift. I began to realize just how much of this was on me. I had been the one to pay off her debt. I had been the one to try to smooth things over. And yet, she didn't seem to appreciate any of it. Worse, she kept going further into debt, knowing full well I'd bail her out again. One night, after another failed conversation, I did something I never thought I would do. I took a look at her phone. I knew it was wrong, but I felt like I had to know the full extent of what was going on. I didn't even care anymore about privacy or trust. I just needed to understand how deep this was. What I found made my stomach drop. There were messages in her group chat with her friends that made it clear how little she respected me. Sophie had been sending them screenshots of our conversations, of the arguments we'd had, and making fun of me. In one message, she wrote, "Matt is such a granddad. Clipping coupons like it's the 80s. I can't believe I married this guy. It's like having another dad, not a husband." I was stunned. I had never felt so small. This wasn't just a joke. It was cruel. But it didn't stop there. The messages went on. Sophie had been telling her friends about our financial issues, but she made it seem like I was the problem. She painted me as this overbearing, controlling husband who was obsessed with saving money, someone who wouldn't let her live her life. She never mentioned how I had paid off her debt or how I was trying to make things work. Instead, she made me look like the villain. That's when it hit me. Sophie didn't see me as a partner anymore. I was just a means to an end, a paycheck, a guy who could clean up her messes. She didn't respect me, and worse, she was actively belittling me behind my back. It was like I was nothing but a joke to her. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and take it anymore. I had been patient, understanding, and forgiving for far too long, but I was done with that. Sophie needed to understand that her actions had consequences, and I wasn't going to be the one to fix everything anymore. But I also knew I couldn't just lash out in anger. I had to be smart about it, methodical, and give her a taste of her own medicine. I began planning my next move carefully. The first thing I did was start tracking my own finances more closely. Sophie had been taking advantage of my generosity, assuming I would always cover for her. But this time, I wasn't going to bail her out. I stopped covering any of her bills. It wasn't about being cruel, it was about showing her the reality of her situation. She was going to have to face the consequences of her actions on her own. A few weeks later, I saw that Sophie had made another big purchase, another impulsive buy that she didn't need. It wasn't a designer handbag this time, but it was just as unnecessary, a high-end gaming console that cost several $100s. The receipt was sitting on the kitchen counter when I got home from work. She didn't even try to hide it. I looked at it for a moment, my blood boiling. I wasn't going to say anything right away. I wasn't going to let her know that I knew. Instead, I waited. I let her enjoy the excitement of the new purchase for a few days, and then I hit her with the truth. One evening, after dinner, I casually asked, "Sophie, what's the balance on your credit card right now?" I didn't raise my voice, didn't sound accusatory. I was calm, maybe too calm. She looked at me, a little taken aback. "What?" "I don't know. Probably a few hundred." I raised an eyebrow. "A few hundred?" I repeated. "Are you sure about that?" She hesitated. "Well, I might have bought that gaming console last week." I just nodded. "That's great, Sophie. You know what else is great? The fact that we've been living paycheck to paycheck, and you keep buying things you don't need. So now I'm wondering, how do you plan on paying for that?" Her face fell, and she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Matt, no," I cut her off. "I've had enough. I'm not cleaning up your mess anymore." She stared at me, speechless for a moment, and I could see the realization dawning on her. She wasn't going to get the easy way out this time. I wasn't going to pay off her debt. I wasn't going to fix the problems she kept creating, and I wasn't going to be the fall guy for her irresponsible choices. The silence between us stretched on, and I could feel the tension building. Sophie opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't ready to hear her excuses. I had already made up my mind. "You need to figure this out on your own, Sophie. I'm done trying to fix everything for you." She blinked, clearly stunned by my words, but I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I was done being her safety net, done being the joke in her group chats. And this time, I was going to make sure she understood that actions had consequences. But Sophie wasn't about to let me go that easily. Not without a fight. After that conversation, everything shifted between Sophie and me. It was as if the air in the house grew thicker, more charged. She didn't apologize, didn't try to justify her spending habits. Instead, she went quiet, too quiet. I could see the wheels turning in her head, and I knew she wasn't taking my words to heart. She wasn't reflecting on her behavior. She was planning her next move. The next few days were eerily calm. Sophie acted like nothing was wrong, but I could tell there was a tension lingering between us, like we were both walking on thin ice. She didn't make any more big purchases, but I knew she was holding back, waiting for the moment to pull her usual tricks. She'd always been good at pretending everything was fine until it wasn't. I kept to my decision, though. I didn't cover her bills. I stopped helping her out with her debts. Every time I saw her slip into her old habits, I ignored it, even though it hurt. Watching her buy things she couldn't afford while I sat there, trying to make ends meet, was unbearable. But I refused to enable her anymore. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. A week after our conversation, Sophie finally came to me, but not in the way I expected. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit she'd been wrong. Instead, she came at me with something that shook me to my core. She had been hiding money from me. I discovered it by accident. One evening, I was cleaning out the office, sorting through some old paperwork. That's when I found a small envelope stuffed behind a stack of bills. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside, there was a substantial amount of cash, thousands of dollars. I sat there for a long moment, stunned, before I went looking for her. When I confronted her, Sophie didn't flinch. "It's my money," she said, her voice flat, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't believe it. "You've been hiding money from me this whole time? After everything that's happened, after everything I've done for you?" She didn't seem the least bit guilty. "You were always so controlling about our finances. I didn't want to fight you about it anymore. I just wanted some freedom. So I started saving." I was shaking with anger. "So while I've been paying off your debts, while I've been trying to make this work, You've been secretly saving money behind my back? I felt betrayed, but I also felt stupid. How had I missed this? Sophie stood there, her arms crossed, unfazed. It's not like I didn't pay my share. You always make it sound like I'm the villain, but I've been contributing. And if you want to know the truth, yeah, I've been saving for myself. I don't want to end up in the same position forever. I couldn't even respond for a moment. I was trying to process the reality that Sophie, the woman I'd been married to, had been secretly saving money while acting like she was financially helpless. It felt like everything had been a lie. The debts, the constant need for help, it had all been a facade, a manipulation. Are you serious right now? I asked, my voice low but laced with fury. You've been playing me for a fool. I've done what I had to do, she said, her eyes cold. You always act like you're doing me a favor, but you're just trying to control me. You always tell me how to spend, how to save. It's exhausting. I need space, Matt. I felt like the ground beneath me had crumbled. Sophie didn't see what she had done as a betrayal. She didn't understand the depth of the damage she had caused. To her, it was just another way of getting what she wanted without feeling restricted. But that's when the full weight of my decision hit me. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living in a marriage where I was the only one holding up our financial future while she did whatever she wanted without consequence. Sophie was no longer someone I could rely on, and she had made it clear that she didn't see me as a partner. I walked out of the room that day, and I didn't come back for a long time. It took a couple of days for Sophie to realize I wasn't going to fix this. She started calling me, texting me, but I didn't respond. She showed up at my work one afternoon, looking desperate. She wanted to talk, she said. She wanted to fix things. But I knew it was too late. The woman I had married, the woman I thought I could trust, was someone who had manipulated me for far too long. I wasn't going to fall for her games anymore. The final straw came when she started telling people I was the one with the problem. She began bad-mouthing me to her friends, making up stories about how I was controlling and obsessed with money. She painted herself as the victim, the one who had been trapped in a relationship where she couldn't do what she wanted. I didn't react at first. I let her run her mouth, thinking she could still manipulate the narrative. But then, one day, I got a call from a mutual friend. They told me Sophie had been bragging about how she was planning to leave me, how she was going to take everything, the house, the savings we had left, and walk away without a second thought. She had no plans to change. She didn't care about the debts or the lies. She just wanted to come out on top, and she was willing to do whatever it took. That's when I made the decision. I filed for divorce. The whole process was messy, and Sophie fought me every step of the way, but in the end, she didn't get what she wanted. I didn't give her a penny more than she was entitled to. I made sure everything was divided fairly, and I made sure to protect what was mine. Sophie thought she could play me, that she could use me as her personal ATM, but in the end, I showed her I was done. I wasn't going to be her fool anymore. Now, a few months later, things are calmer. I've moved on. Sophie hasn't changed. She's still blaming me for everything, still pretending she's the victim, but I don't care anymore. She's the villain in this story, not me. She's the one who destroyed everything, not because of her financial habits, but because of her lack of respect, her manipulation, and her unwillingness to face the truth. As for me, I've learned to trust myself more. I've learned to be more careful about who I let into my life. I'm not looking for a partner who treats me like a stepping stone, someone who thinks their problems are my problems, someone who can't see past their own selfish desires.